Bafundi, I'm making a shirt for one of our very, very best clients who has had, I don't even know, maybe more than 10 shirts made in the same style that we designed for him. And now, recently, he really desires a black and white shirt. So he's got too much blue, got too much purple. He wants black and white. And specifically, he wants a shirt for winter because we are currently in winter. However, I spent the whole winter traveling the whole of Gauteng searching for a black and white fabric that he liked. It had to be kind of swirly patterns like this, couldn't be checks. And yeah, I found so many options that were navy blue or a dark green, but no, he wanted black and white. And it had to be this kind of swirly situation. So anyway, eventually I found it, or I found this one, which he wasn't like 1,000% in love with, but he said he'll more take it since we are actually 4 weeks away from spring. So kind of missed the bus there. But this fabric is super thin. This is like definitely a summer shirt. So what we're going to do is our regular style, but we'll be doubling this with a plain black. So at the moment, there's nothing too exciting to discuss, except that here, these are both stretches, the plain black and this black pattern that I'm using. And of course, the stretch will be more on the weft of the fabric, the back and forth. So generally, if you're doing your yoke, you'll have it orientated the other way around because you want that stretch of your arm to be comfortable. Let me just see what's happening here. There's the front. However, because I only have so much of this fabric, I don't want to travel all the way back to Joburg, and the outside of the yoke is going to be a plain black. So I'll cut that in the correct orientation. But this is going to be now on the inside. So I felt, what the hey, let me just turn that a little bit. And you can't, I don't know if you can really tell, but it's not exactly straight. I did like squeeze it in here because you know me, I love saving fabric, saving the planet. So it's not 1,000% straight, this one, and I'm only doing that because it's kind of like a lining on the inside of the yoke. The outside one I'm going to orientate correctly. So let me finish cutting up all of this, and then I'll cut up the black pieces. Last thing with this fabric is to do the collar and cuffs. Nothing too exciting. Just as you know, I'm really not very fussed about how I cut the collar because, I just cut it big and then we cut the actual shape with the fusing, etc. And then just shape this to that shape. The only interesting thing I can maybe say is on the cuffs. Again, it's conventional. You put the cuffs, going along with the grain line. I'm really not bothered. But just to save some fabric so that everything can fit in neatly, I've put the cuffs in this direction, which again, I feel it's not such a drama on a very small piece. Even the collars, I will do like that. And I'm also not too fussed about the exact measures that I cut here because we're going to put that onto the shape and then shape it like that. I'm only going to do two because on the inside I'll do black. Here, I'm just doing, both sides, the same black. Maybe I should do the cuffs like that as well then. Then I finished cutting the black. Nothing very exciting there. Just that I changed my mind. I am going to do a two-tone on the collars and the cuffs. Because this client likes to flip his cuff up and then he wants a bit of flash there. So that's what we're going to do. Then from there, I need to cut the binding or the piping really. So I need 60 times 2 is 120. And I need on the yoke 120 plus 50, 170. I get 180 or 190 for the odds and sods. So you may as well make it 200, which is a meter. So let's see if we go here. This will give us around 60. That is how long this ruler is. So if we do it at about 50, we will get way more than we need. I'm going to do it at 3 centimeters broad or wide. I'm going to do 2 of those. And I'm just going to obviously cut this as double. So we have 4 times 40. It's about 160. And it's more than that because it's actually 4 times 2, 40 times 2, and 50 times 2. So we get to about 180, which should be more than what we need. But if not, just come back, cut another piece. At least with bespoke, it's not such a massive train smash to do something like that. Whereas obviously if you were manufacturing, you had to come back and cut another piece, you would really mess with the flow of the construction. Right, so that's all of the fabric done. Next, I want to do fusing. So let's see, do I have enough? I need 2 of those, 1 of those. Don't think I'll have enough. Am I not the luckiest man alive? Can of course also use this for the cuffs. Should I just do the cuffs rather? I mean, let's use this last little piece. So this story, I'm sure you know by now, it's all about getting that stiffness on the collar and the cuffs without fusing directly onto the fabric. Because, especially on a stretch, that glue is not going to hold fast, and 1 or 2 washes, you're going to get that bubbling effect. You have to go to therapy, phone your mom, become completely disillusioned with fashion, end up wearing sweatpants. Not going to go so well. So now this chap, we're going to just shorten Just by 1/2 centimeter. Because his neck is a little bit shorter. And he says it feels like it's just too high on his neck. Yeah, I don't think I'll keep you around for all of that. I'm just going to, of course, cut the collar stand. Then I'll cut some silicea. And from there, I think that'll be everything. Obviously, the cuffs also have to cut. And then from there, we start putting it all together. Then, theoretically, I have cut everything. So let's go through it all and make sure I do have everything. So we've got piping, hopefully sufficient. Fusing for the cuffs. Just doing one layer because it's not a very tough cuff. Fusing and silicea for the collar 4. 2 silicias, 1 fusing for the collar stand. Underarm sweat guards. Fusing for like a shoulder pad we do for this gent. Okay, then we've got cuffs. We've got outside and inside. Sleeve. We've got the black portion. This is our button stand. This is you'll see as we go, a unique design we do for this gentleman. Okay. Yoke, we actually didn't need to cut 2 of the fancy one because you're doing, with the black, but anyway, that's how it is. Sleeve of the fancy one. We've got center front. Here's our shoulder pad. We've got the back. And collar and collar 4. We do have 2 here, so we're just going to throw one of those, unfortunately. Then we've got yoke, collar 4, center front. Here we have the side front also, plain black. Then plaquettes and the back. I think this is everything. Here you can see there's a bit of a mark here. It's not very prominent on the inside, but especially cut this back portion because on the outside of the garment, it's going to be this fashion. This is just going to be on the inside. So instead of throwing this away, I just use it here. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and check that all my notches are notched and then give this an iron. You can see, it's been rolled quite a bit, or on the roll for a while. So it has these like little creases. It's usually not such a drama. I'll usually iron something before I cut, but especially with the stretch. So I'm going to give everything an iron, and then we're going to start putting it all together. Back from the iron, back from trimming all those things. Let's see, let's start with here. Here, you join this underarm patch. I'm going to do a zigzag here so these seam allowances don't flap up. And here I trimmed it with the zigzag so I don't have to overlock that. Piping, joined it, of course, with a 45-degree angle. Doesn't have to be any angle, as long as it's not straight, and as long as, obviously, that becomes straight when you join it. Then just iron in half. That's going to relax for a little bit. Button stand. You'll see the style as we go. It just irons one up, or 1 centimeter in. Then this irons so that it's just a little bit less than the full length. And then it will get tucked in like that. It will get there as we go. Of course, the plaquettes I just ironed while I was at it. And here's the shoulder pads. Just gave them some fusing to give them a bit of strength. This side front, I don't need to do anything right now. I suppose I could put the piping on, but I'll do that in a minute because I want to start just with all the hand stitching. Here's my cuffs that I'm going to be basting on there. Collar 4 that gets basted on. Collar stand gets basted on. this piece of the violin, of the Cilicia, I don't trim right now. I'll first wait till I've finished this portion and I'll trim it. And then the other portion of the collar fall and collar and the cuffs, they can just relax for now. Then all the other pieces are getting doubled. So you can see there's the yoke, two fronts, a back, and two sleeves. Of course, before I did this, I just transferred all the marks, like for the, we were going to put the plaquette there, we were going to put the darts here. So what I'm going to do now is baste together these things. I know it's a little bit extra, but I just really don't want to spend all my money on therapy. I want to spend my money on parties. So I'm going to just baste this one. And as you know by now, I'm sure, I like to use these cottons that were donated to us that are just very, very brittle. So they really can't be used for anything other than basting. And then I don't have to use my good thread for basting. And the cotton from this old lady gets to have a bit of a second life. So, yeah, stretch, it loves to move. What I'm going to do is do everything in kind of an arc. I'm going to start one end, just go up the side, around the top, and down the other side, rather than doing the center and sides like I usually do for a baste. And then before I carry on, I'll just give this an iron so that the two pieces can, in a way, felt together. Not that they're felt, this is a polycotton. But you know what I mean. They're just going to really join nicely. And this basting is just going to help keep everything in place as I'm working. So I'll baste this. I'll iron it. And then depending on how these two layers have joined, because I cut both of these separately from the pattern, so they should be roughly the same, but I'm cutting by hand, so everything's going to be a little bit wonky. So once I've ironed it, I'll check and see if it's really necessary to trim anything down. Especially if anything's going to be inside the seam allowance, then I'm going to trim it down. But like that, there's really no point to breaking my hands trying to trim that. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and baste all of this and all of the collar and cuffs. And then from there, we can start putting together. Let's go through these pieces again. Some things have changed as I realize my mistakes while I go. So these ones, yeah, I'm going to zigzag that. We've done with that. I did realize that for the yoke, you actually need two pieces. So basting this piece, wherever it is, this piece, not a smart idea. But since I already cut two of these accidentally previously, I thought may as well have, that as the one piece, this as the other piece, inside and outside. Why not? And of course, putting the label there. A little bit of the same story with the center front. This also not basting. I'm not treating this as one. I'm going to stitch it down the center front, and then this is going to flip over and around. So that's our front like that, and then side panel joining in here. So that's going to be stitched. I finished up with the collar or the collar stand. I had forgotten to cut enough piping for the shoulders there. I did that. And of course here, I basted the collar fall onto the black. The black's going to be the outside fabric. And now I'm going to just stitch that up, basted the cuffs, iron that down. I'm just going to stitch. I'm going to do this in white because this is the whole theme of this shit, black and white. Collar stand. Here's the side pieces. And here I've put the piping. Now this is 3 centimeters wide, divided by 2, 1.5, and my seam allowance here is 1 centimeter. So if I place this here and I stitch the seam, you should see half a centimeter. Of course, you don't cut 1,000% straight, so I'll just show you what I do there to make sure that my piping comes out nice and consistent. For the sleeves, basted that, and what I want to do now is just go along and just stitch around this, where I'm going to cut for the placket, so that when I cut that up, the pieces don't move all over the show. And for the back, I just basted a stitch through the center of the dart, so that it's now holding those two layers together. And now when I fold it, I can stitch that, knowing that the layers aren't shifting. So yeah, nothing too exciting. Back from the sewing machine, back from the iron. Let's look over these pieces. So here I actually wasn't concentrating, so I'm going to have to do this again. I'm supposed to, for this one, stitch on this edge, one machine foot. So that's actually fine. So now I'm going to go over it and stitch here a machine foot, kind of like a fat machine foot, because a machine foot is about 6 mils. So if I stitch a fat one, I'll get to about 7 mils. So that will give me a good mark, watching this edge of where is 5 mils. So when I join, you'll see I'll be able to follow that line and get a perfect seam on the piping. There's the side pieces, side piece, yoke, same story. Collar, a little bit different that I do. I can't remember if I've actually filmed this or not. Here, as you know the story, backstitch, create the bubble, backstitch. But then here I put in a little bit of fusing just on this corner, just to stabilize that. And then I'll go from this side where the stitches are obvious and just reinforce that corner, and then I'll cut and turn around, etc. Cuffs, I'm going to do the exact same thing. So you see I finished stitching this portion. Now I'm going to do this exactly as I do the collar. Sleeves, I did that stitch to stabilize the 2 layers. Now I'm putting on the placket. I'm starting on this under one. I'm doing something a little bit different here where I'm not preparing this one beforehand. I'm going to see if that makes my life a bit easier. You'll be the first to know. And then just, my trick here always to be a little bit over the edge here, so that once I've stitched everything, I can just trim that straight. Those are the sleeves. Center front, nothing too exciting. Here, because this is quite thin, I just put a bit broader stabilizer here than I usually do. Iron it all to the inside, and now I'm going to do an understitch here, and then our fronts will be nice and ready from there. Pieces that are not getting used right now, obviously underarms, shoulder pads, button stand, upper placket, yoke, collar pieces, and the back. There I finished the darts, and I ironed them to the middle. You can do whatever you want as long as it's symmetrical. And yeah, let me pop to the sewing machine and we'll see what happens next. And back for the next round. What's relaxing, of course, underarms, shoulder pads, collar, side. So now that this has been stitched, you can probably see it better on this side. When I stitch when I join it to the next piece, I can just stitch right next door to that stitch line. And then I'll know on this side I'm getting a completely uniform width. But for now, these are just going to relax. Plaquette's relaxing. So here on the center front, I have now done my understitch there. And here it gets a separate button stand like this. Not really a button stand, you'll see. And I've just marked my buttons from the top 7, and then from there 9. Here I'm doing it a centimeter away from the edge of the button stand because this is going to be kind of next door to that understitch, and that's about half a centimeter. So then from the edge, it's going to be 1.5 as usual. So first you have to do these button holes and then join it to the front. So that's actually going to relax a little bit. This side, sometimes I can do it together, sometimes I'll just do it one. Now you'll see it also on this side. With all the manipulations, they don't line up exactly. So once I've got this all done, we trim that down so they line exactly. Then I'm just going to do a top stitch here, maybe at like half, 3/4 centimeters or half a centimeter. Also, just like a notch in here because the side needs to join there and I need to stretch this out a little bit. You could kind of sandwich the side in there, but it's actually just more drama than it's worth. So I just stitch this and then overlock. Collar fall is coming together nicely. I'm going to do a white top stitch there, and then I'm going to come back and sort of stitch it like that. But for now, top stitch. Cuffs, you know the story. I'm going to reinforce those corners. Yeah, sleeves. Yeah, this way of doing the under placket. Yeah, not too bad. I just cut a notch into that stitch point, flipped it around, and then tucked it under, making sure that if I stitch here in the ditch, it is going to catch there. So that was a bit easier. Maybe I will do it like that from now on. And then the center back, stitching now on the yokes, and like I was saying with the front, I'm just going to stitch next door to that stitch line so that when I open this, I know exactly I'm going to have a uniform stripe of piping there. Let's get on with all of that. Again, shoulder pads, no. Underarms, no. Collar stand, no. This one side of the front, no. The back is now done. See, I've got the piece of piping in there. And I think that's actually quite a nice, like he likes very, how can I say, stark, very extreme, very fash things. He doesn't like very boring things. This gentleman, I love it. So, yeah, that's that. And this is just going to now wet around until the fronts are ready. On the fronts, this section, see here's my buttonholes. This edge I ironed up because this I don't want to fold into the hem, but this edge just goes into the collar here. And now I'm just going to stitch. You'll see I have just a design that I stitch here because I don't like this to flap up. So I secure this portion to the garment so that you can just get in under here and do your button. Cuffs, obviously, top stitch. And then sleeves, now I'm stitching the upper part of the plaquette. Just going to stitch along there, again, leaving it a little bit extra down here. Sleeve and sleeve. Okay, this other part of the front, this one I'm going to stitch so long, and I've just notched that. So it curves around nicely. And I'm going to stitch it from this side, so I can stitch just next door to that stitch line, so that my piping is going to be very uniform. And then here on this collar fall, you can see I just shift it like this, just so it lifts ever so slightly. You see there, it's just lifting ever so slightly. And then I'm going to stitch it here, so that at the end of the day, it curls the collar over and around. And then, of course, we'll be putting it into the collar stand itself. Round next. Cuffs are done. Top stitching done. If I'm doing a fitting, I'll leave my basting in just to show this gentleman how hard we work for him. But, this we're just finishing now one time. So basting is out. Trim this down to 1 centimeter, and I've just marked there where I'm going to stitch. That's actually going to relax for a little bit. Okay, collar fall is done. Now it's time for collar stand. Just sandwich method, nothing too exciting there. Sleeves. Now putting in the upper plaquette. Okay, so center front, I do like to do the button and buttonholes while everything is flat because it really lets me see that everything is aligned. Nothing is pulling funny one way or the other. So, yeah, now that I'm happy with that, here, this one, I'm going to now overlock this edge. And this one, I'm now going to do the top stitch, same as I did there, so that I can just notch here and then join in the side. And I'll show you here how I do the buttons or the buttonholes. Yeah. So see, each buttonhole, it's kind of has its own little pocket, because I don't like to just sew it there, because then this is going to flap about. Originally I did 2 at a time, 2 to 2, but it still flapped too much. So this is now the new style, where we stitch each one like that as a pocket. I don't think there's too many exciting things happening there. It's just all about the doing of it. All right, so that front done, overlocked, and I decided to put a top stitch there. Why not? And I may as well start getting the shoulders done, because this is a little bit different to how we usually do. I'm going to do it separate. I'm not going to do that roll situation. I'm going to do one layer, one layer. So of course that's then you're going to be stitched from the other side, following the stitch line that I marked, or following the stitch line that marks where I need to stitch so that the piping can be equal. Sleeves, there we go, got my plaquette done there. So now it's time to do the buttonhole there. Also, you can see it's a little bit longer, so I can just secure that together, and we can just cut that straight. Yo, this fabric is, whew, why my biceps are so big. So here we're going to stitch 1 centimeter seam allowance, and I can measure this 14, so 7's in the center, measure about 6 down, so from the edge, yeah, 8.5 from the very edge, and then my buttonhole will come in there. I'll do that. Obviously the other sleeve same. This portion of the front, of course, notch, join this, overlock top stitch, and we'll get to the shoulder. Now here, I hope you can see it on the camera, but just these 2 tiny little pleats happened, because this is a stretch fabric, so the machine kind of moved it. So here, that fun time called unpicking and redoing. So let me get onto all of that. Nothing too exciting happening at the moment, but I hope this is helping you in some small way here and there. I went ahead and just joined the other sleeve, or the other shoulder. You see what we're going to do here is then take our shoulder pad, scooch that up in there. There are some notches for the seams, and the shoulder pad itself is a little bit broader, maybe longer than the shoulder, so that we can line it up and then trim off the excess. So, now because I'm doing the top stitching, I'm just doing a top stitch in white there. But if I'm not doing that, I'll just do a stitch in the ditch. So, of course, I'm also going to go along the shoulder and the neckline, just securing that all in place. And then, let me just pin this last one. So then I can now do the inside of the yoke shoulder or sleeve. Lots of different ways to do it. I'm just kind of folding it around like that. Stitching that, iron the seam open, and then, yeah, these seams I won't need to really fix in place because they're going to be fixed on the neckline and the shoulder, so we'll be totally fine. Then you can see here on the collar, I've now done all the top stitching, etc. And then here, I just marked here where I want to trim down, and I've just basted that Cilicia again. Now I'm going to trim that down to 1 centimeter. I'll mark my stitch line, and then when the neckline is ready, that'll go on. And there we have it. Shoulders are done. So now, of course, I'm going to just trim all of this gouache and do a top stitch there to keep all of that together. And from there, it's a lot faster. Of course, this whole saga usually takes about 2 seconds, but because of this whole drama and putting the button stand, etc., takes a bit longer. But now that's here, once I've top stitched that, I can just put the sleeves. And then I'm going to do at 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, and then do the, what are we calling it? The fell seam there. Actually, this here is now just way too thick for me to really turn that under and give a top stitch. I mean, I can do it, but I'm not going to enjoy it. So I'm actually just overlocking this and leaving it as is. That'll also give the little bit of a shoulder there, which is going to be nice. And something that I actually have forgotten now a few times in a row is that I'm only supposed to fuse this portion of the shoulder pad, because the rest is caught in the seam, and then it just becomes too thick to turn under. Anyway, this is just spurt. I'll remember that for next time. It's not on the pattern. So I'm just going to actually overlock the arms and the sides, which I'll do in a minute. Here, one thing that I have started doing now with the collar and cuffs is to do this by hand. Why not? Make it opulent. So I'm going to stitch that, of course, and then side seams, and then I'll do the cuffs, put this into the arm, and do the hem. We're basically done. Afundi, that's basically that. Of course, here, because we now have the seam allowances loose, I can just put this underarm guard directly on the seam allowance. I don't have to stitch in the ditch here, which is quite nice. Here, again, too thick, so I just overlocked and I turned that. I can't actually remember if the last shirt I did for him, I had the foresight to stop before the hem here. But anyway, there's no, if I had turned that twice, look, the machine could handle it, but it wouldn't be comfortable. It would be quite bulky for this gentleman. So now I'm just going to, again, stitch that by hand. And you can see it just gives such a nice, neat finish. I always struggled here, especially in this section right by the end, to really catch both sides neatly. And then I saw these really nice Italian shirts from a client, and they had been stitched here by hand, and they were very old. So they were still intact, and I thought, well, let's do that. And so far, no clients have come back saying their collars are falling off. So I think we're good there. And of course, after that, it will just be buttons and buttonholes. And then good delay. Well, Bafundi, there it is. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I just went over, pulled out all the basting, erased all the chalk. I just wanted to maybe look at one quick thing before we wrap up. No, it's the other cuff. Always keep your eyes wide open, because you will notice, I hope you can see it on the camera, but ever so slightly here and there, there's a pulled thread pulling through the, you see a little bit of white just here. And this is a blunt needle. that as it's going through, it's not really piercing the fabric. It's kind of like grabbing a thread and pulling it through. Very, very difficult to see because it's not like a super blunt needle. You can see there it is again. There it is a little bit. Do you see there? So, seeing this now, there's a very obvious one. Seeing this now, I'm at least able to go and fix up, and change my needle. I'm not going to wait until it's really obvious before I change the needle. I'm going to notice it now because my eyes are open, change the needle before I carry on. So just keep your eyes open for things like that because it's better you spot it while it's almost invisible than you let your client spot it when you've ruined his whole shirt. We're going to take a photo of this now and then we are done.